Ya son las 9. Muy bien. De San José, Costa Rica, vamos a consultarle a la Secretaría cómo está la conexión de las delegaciones y diferentes participantes que nos acompañarán en la sesión del día de hoy.
Buenos días, Canciller Solano. Les solicitamos unos instantes para terminar el proceso de admisión en línea de las delegaciones de los países que nos van a acompañar para iniciar la reunión. Entiendo que en unos 2 o 3 minutos podemos hacerlo, si está de acuerdo.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Quedo atento.
The Secretariat is requesting 2 or 3 minutes in order to settle a few details before beginning the meeting.
Buenos días, señoras delegadas.
Good morning, everyone, delegates. We have here Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Raúl García Buchacas, Joint Executive Secretary for the Management and Analysis of ECLAC programs, and we welcome everyone with us from San Jose. Rodolfo Solana Quiroz, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, as Chair of the South-South Cooperation Committee of ECLAC, accompanied by Adriana Bolaños, Vice Chancellor for International Cooperation and Bilateral Relations, and Olvita Hernández, Director for International Cooperation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica.
Recording in progress.
Welcome. We also greet the Ambassador of Costa Rica to Chile, Adriana Amarillo, and Ambassador Rodrigo Carazo, Permanent Representative of Costa Rica to the United Nations, and welcome all delegations. Yesterday, we enjoyed participation by delegations from 35 ECLAC member countries and 4 associate members. And yesterday, we ended the session with an exchange of ideas and viewpoints on how the economic and social impact of COVID-19 have ample or extended inequality, low productivity, and fragmented access to external financing. In this context, we highlighted the multilateral response that does not fully address the needs of developing countries to cope with the deepening crises. The Executive Secretary, Alicia Bárcena, stressed the importance of addressing the development needs of countries beyond the income-based classification and graduation criteria to capture both vulnerabilities as well as the multidimensional nature of sustainable development in line with the provisions of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And today, we will begin with the panel on the 20th session of the United Nations High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation. And if you agree, Chair, first of all, we could listen to the message sent to us by the permanent representative of Argentina. But first of all, we hand over to the Chancellor for your initial greeting. Well, thank you very much and good morning, everyone from San Jose de Costa Rica, Casa Amarilla, the home of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship. After a very productive day yesterday with quality discussions, promoting and hoping to continue today with these same topics and moving ahead in our areas of interest. And during this session, as the Secretariat said, the agenda related to the outcome of the 20th session of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation of the United Nations. We highlight that the multilateral response has not fully addressed the needs of developing countries. In order to address the deepening crisis, the Executive Secretary, Alicia Bárcena, stressed the importance of addressing the development needs of countries beyond the income-based classification and graduation criteria to capture both their vulnerabilities as well as the multidimensional nature of sustainable development in line with the provisions of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And so today, we will have an opportunity to continue deepening on this based on the outcome of the 20th session of the United Nations High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation. And so we would like to welcome the message sent to us by the permanent representative of Argentina, María del Carmen Squeff, as chair of the High-Level Committee.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be part today of this extraordinary meeting of the Committee on South-South Cooperation of ECLAC. First, I would like to greet my dear and respected Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of the Commission, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, Rodolfo Solano Quiroz, whose country is acting as a pro tempore chair of ECLAC and chair of the executive presiding officers of this meeting. And also my greetings to the representatives of Cuba, Jamaica, Mexico, and Peru, with whom my country is sharing the vice chairmanship of the panel. And also, I'd like to greet Adel Abdellatif, Director of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, and thank him for the support provided together with his team during the preparation before the meeting and that have contributed to the success of the committee. Colleagues, as you know, from the 1st to the 4th of June, the 20th session of the high-level meeting of the United Nations Committee for South-South Cooperation for the formulation of policies on this type of cooperation at global level. My country took on the chair of the committee with a firm commitment to work together to all member states in order to strengthen institutionally South-South cooperation and foster partnerships that will allow the execution of projects with an effective impact on the development of our countries. This session was marked by two major issues. On the one hand, the COVID-19 pandemic and the multidimensional crisis that this is producing in our countries. This was one of the core elements during the days of the meeting. And furthermore, it was the first meeting of the committee after the adoption of the final document of the second high-level conference of the United Nations on South-South cooperation, known as PAVA Plus 40, and that was held in Buenos Aires in 2019. Therefore, the follow-up of the implementation of the consensus reached there in the light of the new reality was at the heart of the agenda. The world, since the adoption of the PAVA Plus 40, has changed, and in fact, the tools, necessary resources, and priorities for development based on which cooperation South-South is understood requires to be considered according to the new international scenario. And within this framework, I would like to share with you a few reflections on the discussions that were created during the 20th meeting and the outcomes that these have resulted in, and which are consolidated in the final document adopted by acclamation. First, we recognize the very relevant positioning acquired by South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in the development scenario, and the sphere of action and activities deployed have increased in recent years. This indicates that even in an extremely challenging context for developing countries, they have continued to cooperate in order to ensure based on a spirit of solidarity, the health emergency as required in these countries. However, cooperation among the global South countries have been negatively affected by the pandemic, and which has revealed the systemic weaknesses of developing countries, exacerbating their vulnerabilities and inequalities, at the same time threatening to stop or even erase the progress achieved in the consecution of the 2030 agenda. In view of this, during the general discussion, there was emphasis placed on the fact that developing countries without distinction according to their income levels requires direct help, financial and trade facilities, refinancing of their debt, and renewed mechanisms for international cooperation in order to achieve a solvent and equitable recovery. And likewise, we reiterated the need to increase triangular cooperation, the transfer of technology and financial and non-financial support mechanisms that will contribute to prevent setbacks along the path toward the development of our people. The committee held a call to facilitate equitable, accessible, and timely access to safe and effective vaccines against COVID-19, as well as treatments, diagnosis, and health care services through the COVAX mechanism and other relevant mechanisms, especially in low and middle-income countries, to therefore speed up world recovery and contribute to putting an end to the pandemic. Furthermore, the committee convened and called to move ahead decidedly, establishing multi-player partnerships and understanding that through the work together between the state, civil society, the academia, and the private sector, it will be possible to extend the scope and impact of South-South and triangular cooperation, contributing to help the efforts deployed by member states in the implementation of their public policy for development. And in relation to the efficacy of South-South and triangular cooperation, the membership encouraged to move ahead in strengthening mechanisms for follow-up and transparency, and in turn proposed continuing analysis of the contribution made by these modalities of cooperation from an outcome-based approach. As to the role of the United Nations in the architecture of international cooperation, it was recognized that in a context of complex development, agencies, funds, and programs have facilitated the exchange of knowledge, experience, and technologies that will enable the creation of human capacities and institutional capacities in developing countries. In this sense, the committee reiterated the need to ensure the human financial resources necessary for planning and management of international cooperation that is more effective. At the same time, the members of the committee considered that the definition of the ample strategy of the United Nations on South-South and triangular cooperation may have a positive impact on the form of cooperation of this organization, since it is able to integrate all initiatives taken on by the activities in different areas. And so this ample strategy will allow simplifying the instruments and cooperation, South-South and triangular, the strategic frameworks of these entities at the world level, as well as the frameworks of cooperation for sustainable development of the organization at country and regional level. Therefore, we highlight that the follow-up of implementing the ample strategy and the achievements made within the system should be considered at the next session of the committee. As to the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, membership reaffirmed their mandate and reiterated their function as an entity responsible for coordinating, promoting, and facilitating South-South and triangular cooperation for development at the global level and within the UN system. And additionally, highlighted the performance this has had in managing and articulating funds that taking part in, such as the UN Fund for South-South Cooperation, the Trust Fund Pérez Guerrero for South-South Cooperation, and the Mechanism for the Relief of Poverty and Hunger of India, Brazil, and South Africa, an IPSA fund. During the closing session of the committee, members reiterated that it is of top priority mobilize greater resources towards these mechanisms, which will allow extending the portfolio and scope of these projects. Likewise, all stakeholders were encouraged to conclude and increase cooperation towards developing countries by means of the UN mechanisms, such as the Fund for Response and Recovery of COVID-19, furthered by the General Secretary, and the Fund for Sustainable Development Goals. These resources will contribute to strengthen the capacity of developing countries in their task to contain the spread of COVID-19 and mitigating the adverse effects of this pandemic. Dear colleagues, to conclude, I would like to highlight that although this session was challenging, given the uncertainty that still persists in the international scenario, the members of the committee have, throughout negotiations, maintained a very constructive and proposal-based attitude. And Argentina, as chair, will bear very much in mind the concerns and messages expressed during the 20th session of the committee, as well as what was agreed in Papa Plus 40. We will work with the entire international community in the devising an architecture for South-South and triangular cooperation based on concrete actions and in line with national development priorities. It is with this relevant challenge, the work done together will be essential with the ECLAC South-South Cooperation Committee in order to strengthen the ties with the countries of the region and the rest of the world in the South. We must move together jointly, and the convergence of our approaches and interests will lead us to the conclusion of international cooperation at the reach of everyone. Thank you very much.
We thank Mrs. María del Carmen Squeff for your words and the results
of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation of the UN, particularly your last statement in that the working attitude in spite of uncertainty and difficult times is constructive, proposing measures, and that we need to work jointly together in order to overcome them and solve cooperation, South-South cooperation. Now I give the floor to Abdellatif, Director of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. The floor is yours, Mr. Abdellatif.
Thank you, and good morning from San Jose, Costa Rica. I'm actually spending my holiday, so it is a good opportunity to be with you today. Your Excellency, Minister Rodolfo Solano Queiroz, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, Under Secretary General Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, distinguished participants and colleagues. It is an honor and privilege to participate today at the extraordinary meeting of the Committee on South-South Cooperation in Latin America and the Caribbean. And as you have already identified, that this session is addressing the outcome of the 20th session that took place last June. In this context, I would like to thank Ms. María del Carmen Squeff, Chair of the HLC 20th session, for her able and skillful management of this meeting, actually, that took place 5 years of the last session that was in 2016. And I would like to extend our thanks from the office also to the other members of the Bureau of the HLC 20th. I would like to take this opportunity to update your committee on a major achievement that actually last year and this year, which is the finalization of the UN system-wide strategy on South-South and triangular cooperation. And the reason why I wanted to focus on this, because this is the first time the UN system actually has a system-wide strategy on South-South and triangular cooperation, and also because the high-level committee in its 20th session took note of the strategy, and also requested the Secretary General to update the member states on the development of this strategy. I would, if you'd like to go to the second slide. Next. Can we move to the next slide, please? Well, the general picture of the South-South cooperation in the United Nations, which actually you have it in front of you, we have more and more UN entities actually have units and focal points. More than 40 UN entities, as you see, has already established. And we have around 23 UN entities incorporated elements of South-South cooperation and strategy. In 2018, the office actually, with all the agencies, established the UN Interagency Mechanism for South-South and Triangular Cooperation. In fact, you know, this comes within the work of the office in order to see how we can support the member states in their work, and that happened actually in 2019 in the second conference on South-South cooperation that took place in Argentina, years after the first conference in 1978. And I would like to pose the region, actually the Latin American and Caribbean region, for its actually support for South-South cooperation, and I can say laying the South-South cooperation foundation that took place in the last 40 years. If I move to the next slide, please. Well, the work actually that we have done with all the agencies during the last 2 years was based on an accumulation of work that took place during the last 10 years. We had, first of all, the framework of operational guidelines on UN support in 2016. And in 2017, the Secretary General Executive instructed the office to start the elaboration of the system we actually draw on these reports, and also we draw on the conclusions of the Better Plus 40 outcome report in 2019. The contribution of over 40 UN entities actually to the system-wide strategy should be acknowledged. And I would like in my next slide actually to provide you with the main elements of the system-wide strategy. The system-wide strategy, its purpose actually to ensure coordinated and coherent support member states in achieving the 20th agenda and delivering on SDGs. And its function also is to guide and point the way toward even greater use of South-South and triangular cooperation. And the implementation, of course, as we have a diversity of agencies and specialized agencies, is governed by each entity individually based on its mandate and program of work. The importance of the strategy, in fact, is the first time that it will allow us, first of all, to track and monitor and also document the progress of South-South cooperation within the UN system. And of course, as all the agencies are working directly with member states, that will help also to capture, the activities and the efforts by the member states in promoting and in establishing South-South cooperation. This is one of the challenges that we are facing, is to document the good practices that each region is doing. And also I would like to acknowledge here that during our work, we have, of course, some kind of preliminary results. The most actually documented in the global south actually are in Latin America and the Caribbean. And in 2019 only, there were more than 1,000 initiatives that is either bilateral or regional, or also reaching to other regions in Africa and Asia. Next. The strategy, as I mentioned earlier, is to provide for the first time a system-wide policy orientation. We used to have actually a challenge in to the member states on the work that we are doing on that the UN system is doing, and actually which is presented annually to the second committee under the report of the Secretary General South-South Cooperation. The system-wide strategy will help us actually to better report to the member state, inform them, and also provide them with recommendations on what should be done in order to promote and enhance the cooperation within regions and among the regions. The strategy is actually divided in to 3 levels. If I go to the next slide, it is the country level, regional level, and the global. Of course, there is, as you may notice, there is some emphasis at the country level, because that's where we are facing, some challenges in identifying and documenting good practices. And we are actually currently with the whole UN system, and of course the RC system in particular, to see how we can mainstream the South-South cooperation in the United Nations Sustainable Development Frameworks. So we will see that you have common country analysis, the capacity assessment, the stakeholder engagement and programming. This is at the country level, and the regional level, which we are addressing today. There is support to policy formulation and regional cooperation and knowledge sharing. And as I mentioned, your region has been very generous and supportive to South-South cooperation, and providing a lot of ideas that we are currently sharing also with other regions. And at the global level, it's also about the support formulation, policy formulation, and knowledge sharing. If I go to the next slide, I would like to present to you the strategy, which we have just finalized last April and presented to the Executive Committee of the Secretary General, which endorsed the action plan. And as you see, this is the first time also that we have clear outcomes, 5 outcomes, that will help us and guide us in looking at the different aspects of South-South cooperation. And it's mainly focused on how we support the member states, either by strengthening the UN at the country level, at the regional level, also how we can strengthen the institutional and human and technical capacity in countries of the South. And that's a very important outcome, because in Latin America and the Caribbean, we noted that most of the countries actually, they have either entities in ministries of foreign affairs or international cooperation that are dedicated on South-South cooperation, but this situation is not in many countries in our South, and particularly in Africa, and that is an area where we can benefit from experience and expertise and knowledge of Latin America and the Caribbean that could be actually benefit other countries, particularly in Africa and particularly LDCs. Outcome 3, it's the integration of Southern perspective and needs in the global and region. And outcome 4, which actually is at the heart of South-South cooperation, how we can improve exchange of experiences and know-how. In that context, the office has established the South-South Galaxy as a digital platform to start facilitating the exchange of experiences and know-how between. And we have actually, during the last 2 years, achieved some kind of progress in that, and we are looking forward to enhance that. The last outcome is related, of course, to the question of resources and expertise. And as mentioned, in the presentation of Her Excellency, the permanent representative of Argentina, the HLC also put some emphasis in its decision in the 20th session on the question of funding. And currently we have the United Nations Fund for South-South Cooperation that was established in 1995. And before that, of course, we have the Perez Guerrero, which was established in 1983 and started to work in 1986. And we have also the IPSA Fund, which is the India, Brazil, and South Africa. And recently we have the India UN Trust Fund, which was established in 2017. And I would like also to acknowledge here that to the United Nations Fund for South-South Cooperation. So more and more, actually, in the last few years, we have more commitment on the question of funding. I cannot say these are big resources, but still it shows the commitment of the member states to the South. And more actually helps us, through these projects to identify what are the areas that, of course, will need that we strengthen in the future, particularly in COVID-19. We noticed, in the programming in the last few years, in the last 2 years, actually, it was mainly about how MDCs and small islands to address the impact of COVID-19. The next slide I will address, and this is the last slide, the key outcomes at the regional level. And I would like also to present this to you. That these are the 6 outcomes actually that the UN entities actually identified to be regional level, were mainly on the enhanced understanding the contribution of the formulation of regional and sub-regional policies, and the coherence of institutions, and the enhanced policy formulation. I will not read all of it, but I would like also to stress again the importance of the cooperation between regions, because that's what we lack until now. We can monitor, and identify a lot of good practices at the regional level, of course, and also in Asia, but we have less actually, of course, within, and we have much less actually between regions. And I think your committee is actually leading and actually effort at the regional level. And I think if we have a similar platform in the other regions, that would be very helpful in order to see how we can promote South-South cooperation. And we have entered or in discussion with the other regional commissions in Africa and Asia to see how we can promote that. And also we are trying to countries, that can take the lead in the 2 regions. And we would like also to see this opportunity to that Costa Rica can, of course, lead this effort, by communicating the results, meeting, to other regions, and see how we can work together on that. Finally, I would like to see this opportunity also that we are currently preparing our strategic plan for the next 4 years, and definitely the outcome of your meeting will be very important for us in order to see how we can include your conclusions in the outcome that we have to focus in the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
¿Aló? Ya. Muchas gracias por su presentación, señor
Thank
director.
you for your presentation, Mr. Director. The strategy of the UN system for cooperation shows the vital need of link between or among global, regional, and national associations. That synergy is key. Now, I would like to give the floor to the Director of International Cooperation of Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, Rita Hernández. She participated in the high-level committee on South-South cooperation as chair of the Committee on South-South Cooperation of ECLAC. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. To all of you who are with us. It is a pleasure to refer in this segment, but first and foremost, I'd like to congratulate Argentina for the very fruitful meeting of the high-level Committee of South-South Cooperation of the UN, as well as to the Director of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for the organization of it. Costa Rica assumed with great enthusiasm the chair of the South-South Cooperation Committee of ECLAC, convinced to continue with the strengthening of international cooperation, which is a valuable tool for development in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. As I said in my intervention in June, our region has had a historical commitment with South-South and triangular cooperation. And today we seek innovative criteria in order to overcome our vulnerabilities using all the mechanisms involved. To be amidst a changing situation exacerbated by the world pandemic crisis and natural disasters, we are forced to have tools proposing rapid, fast, efficient, effective solutions in an inclusive and solidarian manner. South-South and triangular cooperation offer tremendous potential for developing countries, given that it allows to explore different experiences and contribute with solutions to the challenges of the new international context that we are facing. For our chair of the committee, to have synergies with member countries of ECLAC and UNOSSC, it means a great opportunity to bring together efforts and supplement each other in this enormous challenge to overcome the exacerbated situations due to the pandemic that have affected us all, socially, economic, and environmentally. It needs to be clear that South-South cooperation is an important element of international cooperation for development as a supplement and not as a replacement of North-South cooperation. South-South cooperation has taught us to be more solidarian among ourselves, to allowed us to acknowledge our uniqueness as a region and supplement each other in a solidarian way. In the high-level committee meeting on South-South cooperation, in different interventions, countries there called to increase contributions for South-South cooperation in order to eradicate poverty and promote sustainable development. Also, a call was made to developed countries so as to intensify their efforts in order to strengthen South-South cooperation and to continue increasing effectiveness of their development activities in accordance with the provisions of the final document of the Buenos Aires Conference of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, committing to strengthen triangular cooperation as a means to bring together expertise, knowledge, and experiences that are relevant for the cooperation for development. All these reflections and thoughts are shared by the ECLAC committee. It is a very useful space to strengthen dialogue in order to have more effective cooperation to face the effects of the pandemic at all levels of society. This objective we want to leverage, raising the status of the committee to regional conference with all the advantages involved, as it has been fully documented in our deliberations.
The region's development model has already faced major structural issues and has led to limitations with regard to the balance of payments, exports that are focused on low technology areas, crises, exchange rate crises, and recurring debt crises, as well as other issues, low growth, high levels of informality and poverty. And as a result, well, also the health crisis has exacerbated the situation, making inequality more worse, as in addition to disparities. We fully agree that only together and through creative, comprehensive models such as South-South cooperation will we be able to move forward urgently and in a renewed fashion. All of the above will call for regulatory support, technical assistance for developing partnerships, sharing knowledge, and the active participation of many stakeholders, in addition to raising more financing for development from sundry sources. We have already expressed and approved in the final document this at the final document, outcome document of BAPA plus 40, and we recognize the support of UN for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation for sustainable development, all within the context of the 2030 agenda. In this regard, ECLAC has always proven to be a partner for the region because it is a catalyst for the UN efforts to secure attainment of the 2030 agenda through South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation. Costa Rica firmly believes in the country's capacity, the developing country's capacity to find solutions to their development issues, always in keeping with their special needs. Now, our state policy with regard to South-South and triangular cooperation has become increasingly more robust thanks to successful programs carried out over the years. BAPA plus 40 has shown that this form of cooperation is helpful, and this has renewed our commitment to work toward a more equitable world. We still have challenges lying ahead that are hindering the full realization of South-South and triangular cooperation. We know that the current model is difficult. There's an asymmetric situation of the countries. We also know that there are external factors and incoherent policies, a lack of institutional capacity as well, and difficulties to measure and outcomes. These are some of the issues that remain pending and that we must improve. Despite that, we are fully convinced that we will secure synergies just like the other regions within the UN have done, and this will allow us to build forward better. And this is the time to consider the country's development, measurement, indicators, and criteria. we need to pull together our efforts to secure greater equity. Synergies are necessary since they reinforce the concept of multilateralism, which is key for us to take on the new challenges of the global world. We have a shared vision within the South and the shared vision to reinforce South-South cooperation. This is reflected under the 2030 agenda and the SDGs, and this is our North Star with regard to moving toward all types of cooperation. South-South cooperation is a window of opportunity for us to supplement North-South cooperation. This allows us to have dialogue between peers and countries with relatively homogeneous socioeconomic development levels. The starting point is unity, integration, and partnerships around common goals and challenges that will make the development cooperation system more dynamic. Within the 2030 agenda context, South-South cooperation is based on the same development philosophy, a philosophy that is based on the premise of collective action and unity, solidarity. Cooperation allows us to pull together efforts and come up with a systematic system within the framework of sustainable development. This also allows us to take advantage of synergies that will enable us to be strategic with regard to attaining our goals. We know that the grave socioeconomic and health consequences of the pandemic and the international system have resulted in vulnerabilities, uncertainty, chaos, and they have caused great setbacks with regard to attaining the 2030 agenda. As a result, we need to pull together our efforts to resume our path in the past. So the Committee on South-South Cooperation, now the Future Conference, is a reflection of our goals, the reflection of horizontal collaborative efforts toward development. This allows us to put a human face on development for all of the developing countries. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. After we have heard from Ms. Squeff, Director Abdellatif, and Ambassador Hernández, I have noticed that you all refer to synergies, articulated, coordinated efforts, for example, among all of the stakeholders working with South-South cooperation. This is something we must always bear in mind when trying to work better. Yesterday, we talked a great deal about how cooperation is the only way to overcome the crises we face, and South-South cooperation must play a leading role in this recovery period. That's why the coordinated efforts among all of us who are seated here today, among the academic sector, private sector, and NGOs is crucial. Now, I would like to give the floor to Manfred Haebig, the main project advisor for cooperation issues of GIZ. And Mr. Haebig, you have the floor. Thank you. Good morning. Ms. Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of ECLAC, presiding officers. I received a message from my colleague, Christoph Kirstig, the project director from the Regional Fund for Triangular Cooperation in Latin America and the Caribbean just a few years ago. And unfortunately, he has been stranded in the airport in Madrid without connectivity. So I was called upon to relieve him and be here in his stead. I have 4 brief messages for you. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly been an immediate threat for development, but at the same time, it has become an opportunity to bring about structural change that will lead us to a better future. It has obviously exacerbated the structural challenges that we face in the region. For example, productivity gaps, social vulnerabilities, institutional issues, and conflict related to natural resource exploitation. That's why this event is so important. So we also know that a post-pandemic recovery period will provide us with the opportunity to build back better and have more inclusive and sustainable development. Two, the international recovery system requires innovation. We see that there's a growing number of countries in the region, such as Chile and Uruguay, who are actually graduating from official development assistance and moving toward regular aid funds. And there are new sources and new ways to seek financing as well. So the development and transition program specifically seeks to promote more dialogue in this regard and have a new approach, independent international approach to financing that goes beyond the official financing for development approach. Now, within GIZ, we believe that the international cooperation system should continue to renew itself and become more innovative in order to aid middle-income countries in attaining their development goals related specifically to SDG 16. Now, alongside other actors such as ECLAC, the European Union, the OECD, and CAF, for example, we agree that these new approaches to strengthen institutional capacity in order to in turn come up with comprehensive responses truly should work together and involve all types of countries regardless of the development level. They also should try to strengthen partnerships using different tools such as South-South cooperation, triangular or multilateral cooperation, without disregarding official aid for development. But it's necessary to also find non-traditional aid for development. Three, there are different projects and German projects and modalities for cooperation are already adopting new approaches. For example, we have the original fund for triangular cooperation with our partners in Latin America and the Caribbean. This regional fund was created back in 2010 and is based on three key prongs. One, technical and assistance, financing for specific projects, and then capacity building. Thirdly, political dialogue. Since 2010, 89 projects have been carried out with 30 countries in all types of sectors, many in the energy sector or governance and other sectors. Now, despite not all the projects have been successful, still we believe there are many lessons learned from our experience in triangular cooperation. For example, Adel Abdellatif referred to that. That is one example. Now, since June of this year, the ministry, in addition to consolidating what has been achieved thus far, is focusing on fostering partnerships and strategically employing triangular cooperation mechanisms. This type of cooperation is quite different from the traditional scheme of cooperation. It's different from the North-South type of cooperation and is actually highlighting mutual learning, mutual experiences, and taking advantage, leveraging the various partners' capacity, because we know that this is a different world today. This is the post-official aid world. And so we need to take into consideration transformative post-pandemic approaches at all levels. Now, we have a portfolio of regional projects and programs that has been rolled out with ECLAC in keeping with the strategic framework and in keeping with GIZ. Now, at present, our growing cooperation portfolio consists of the following 5 projects. 1, inclusive, sustainable, and intelligent cities within the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Latin America and the Caribbean, which focuses on connectivity, urban connections, and sustainable urban living. 2, recovering better, building back better, and overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic in Latin America and the Caribbean, focusing on social, fiscal protection, industrial development, and others. 3, regional cooperation for sustainable development of mineral resources in the Andean region, and 4 and 5 refer to regional activities linked to global programs. One, dialogues focusing on the link between water, energy, and agriculture, and the other is a global program for energy transition. And fourth, to wrap up, I would like to provide you with some personal reflections, if you will. Now, we know that for established stakeholders, innovation involves questioning what one does and to shake things up. This is a concept known in the private sector and in the public sector. And I think it also applies to us in the sector of cooperation for development. Germany will continue to work with middle income countries and will work with others, third party countries as well. Now that's quite true and sure. What isn't certain and something we should be debating is how we will go about this and what will be the future forms of our cooperation. So what we are familiar with today is not the end of this story. It's just another chapter in a book that we should write together going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Haebig, for your remarks and specifically for confirming that Germany will continue to work with the middle income countries. I am sure that we will continue working in a coordinated fashion to figure out how best to go about doing this. Now we will move on to statements by the delegations. I would like to request that you limit your remarks to 3 to 5 minutes. We have received a request from Bruno Del Mazo from the Spanish International Aid Agency. Mr. Del Mazo, you have been recognized.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hi there. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. From the Spanish International Aid Agency, we believe that cooperation for development clearly is under transformation. As mentioned here several times at this forum, we are currently moving through a transition internationally. We see that the rules and the logic, they're all changing in terms of cooperation for development. The various stakeholders involved in the traditional sector, in the North-South cooperation have been questioned. And we see that the aid for development is more horizontal than in the past. Now, this new modus operandi, if you will, is proving to be the most effective mechanism to ensure cooperation for all and providing solutions that meet the parties' needs. That is why Spain firmly believes that triangular cooperation is the best instrument to bring about joint efforts and to pull together responsibilities, accountabilities to ensure that we are all working together to maximize outcomes and develop everyone's capacities and to create linkages that are in keeping with our working culture. Now, our aid agency has been working on triangular cooperation for 10 years now as a priority way to consolidate cooperation in Latin America and to work toward attaining the 2030 agenda under this concept of common responsibility. We have worked through different measures, used different measures to reinforce cooperation in order to strengthen the capacity of the member countries in the region. And we believe that we have secured significant results. Now, today, the Ibero-American partner is a leader in terms of South-South and triangular cooperation. For example, we have issued already 10 annual reports on this issue with all the various data contained therein with regard to the volume, the wealth, and the extent of this type of cooperation. Moreover, we need to underscore the Ibero-American program to strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation. This program has been working for more than 10 years as a mechanism specifically focused on reinforcing these types of cooperation mechanisms in the region with Spain and the other dear friends and colleagues. In recent years, this program has, well, we know that this concept of triangular cooperation as one of the best ways to see cooperation has grown. And this is one new way to bring about international cooperation. We believe this will be the future. And we know that the well-being of all of us is all of our responsibility. And we have seen that a reflection of this has been the time devoted to this in various international fora. Papa Plus 40, for example, is a perfect reflection of this. Now, this entire dynamic has resulted in many fruits, and the highest level international organizations led by the UN are currently focusing on the important role of this type of cooperation. This meeting, for example, and the sponsored by ECLAC and others are truly doing their part to attain the 2030 agenda using South-South cooperation.
The world crisis in 2019 has dramatically showed that the world is one. Issues are in common and we're all implied in the resolution of this. It is only through cooperation and teamwork that we will be able to move ahead, overcome the difficulties, and the progress of all of the most vulnerable is a matter for all. So Spanish cooperation is working intensely in Latin America and the Caribbean to establish partnerships, associations, commitments in a lasting manner so that triangular cooperation projects together with South-South cooperation may continue to be more extended in the region and may enjoy the institutional mechanisms, financing, and appropriate implementation. And likewise, we will agree among all that South-South and triangular cooperation may continue developing and growing in the next decade to thereby increase their weight and relevance with a view to a developing world and to attain the 2030 agenda. Thank you. Thank you very much to the Spanish Cooperation Agency. And now the floor is being requested by the delegate of Brazil. The floor is yours, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. At the outset, I'd like to convey the Brazilian delegation heartfelt greetings to Madam Executive Secretary of ECLAC and to the high authorities from the government of Costa Rica. I will be very brief, and I'd like to just inform that the head of the Brazilian delegation, Ambassador Pereira, he's at the very moment heading a meeting here at the Brazilian Chancellery. He received a commission to chair this meeting dealing with international emergency, and he shall join us as soon as possible. My comment regards to the role that can be played by the UN Regional Economic Commissions in support to the framework that has been presented by UNOSSC. We believe that the regional commissions do have a very important role to support the promotion of triangular cooperation within the UN system, particularly in three areas: applied research, data collection, and capacity building in public policies. This partnership, of course, has been implemented in the last decades, but we always have a space to give more emphasis to these partnerships and the relationship between the initiatives conceived and supported by UNOSSC with support of the regional economic commissions. In Brazil, as we have been very strong and long supporter of triangular cooperation through UN agencies, we are ready to, we are renewing our commitment to engage with ECLAC and UNOSSC in any activity that we may identify in those areas. Thank you very much, Madam.
Muchas gracias al representante.
I thank the representative of Brazil, and I have a request for the floor by Paraguay on this topic.
Perdón, pero creo que Cuba.
I apologize, but I believe that Cuba had requested the floor earlier. Yes, but I'm told that Cuba is to refer to the yesterday's topic on the conference. So we will leave it as the last intervention in this item of the agenda, and to refer now to what has been explained today. Thank you. In that case, good morning, everyone, and thank you. We merely wanted to thank the representatives who have spoken on the outcomes of the 20th period of sessions of the high-level Committee on South-South Cooperation, and relay the relevance of this committee and its possible governance with the participation of countries as well as all countries who were present in BAPA +40 with a specific paragraph on the topic. To continue enjoying the participation of member states in consultation, inclusive and transparent during the ordinary period of sessions in order to continue to improve and furthering South-South and triangular cooperation by means of all known mechanisms. Also say that in that session, our Director General for Multilateral Policy, Ilan Feliz, ratified the relevance of all the experience acquired over the last 40 years with the South-South modality, and highlighted the progress made together, especially in social protection, combating poverty and innovation, but also highlighted the debt still pending in crucial areas and the persisting challenges, and that depart us even further from our desired goals. And therefore, we have proposed to continue strengthening and consolidating partnerships, convinced that international cooperation for development is the best alternative in the search for solutions for everyone together. Thank you. Thank you. And now, yes, we would recognize the Vice Minister Deborah Rivas, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Cuba, to refer to what was discussed yesterday. Vice Minister, the floor is yours. Thank you. We would like to say that at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Cuba, we thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for this very interesting panel, as well as what was said yesterday. We thank you for the presentations. This closes a cycle, and the fact that it may become a conference. The outcomes, as mentioned now, the high-level meeting held in June, we say that this is tangible. I'm going to take this off because I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying. Looking at your faces, I felt that you were not understanding what I was saying. And these results that we are seeing, these efforts made by the UN system to strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation as a means for implementing the 2030 agenda and the outcomes of the reform process. The strategy of the UN system for South-South and triangular cooperation for sustainable development, we believe that it is an important step in achieving a greater coordination. And this is what has prevailed in the presentations heard over the last 2 days. And we believe that these efforts are what will help us to achieve the sustainable development goals, as well as facing, as was said earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic that is affecting everyone right now. Cuba is one of the countries, as you know, that was present at the high-level committee meeting held last June, and we reiterated the commitment of the Cuban government to implement the 2030 agenda and strengthen and expand cooperation. It was also said last June the 13th when we presented a report at the high-level political forum on sustainable development together with other states of the region. As is known, Cuban medical cooperation has helped out in other countries and Venezuela. Last August the 14th, when there was terrible earthquake in Haiti, Cubans have accompanied our Haitian brothers and will continue to do so throughout this period. We also ratified at this meeting on South-South cooperation that the Latin American and Caribbean region may continue to count on Cuba and its cooperation. We already have 2 Cuban vaccines that are being used, and also another 3 candidates that are in an advanced state of development and that we hope to conclude soon. And I believe that this is of great interest, especially for this cooperation committee. As of course you know that it is very difficult for us to do this scientific development and all our cooperation activities, given the usual development of the country and the continued financial, economic, and trade blockade by the US. And this is the main obstacle to the development of our country. I would like to take this opportunity to express our welcome to the proposal made by the ECLAC Secretariat to strengthen the mandate of this subsidiary body and the conditions so that autonomously it may become a space for discussion and exchange of experience among ECLAC member states, and that may contribute to follow up on these topics at national, regional, international level, and facilitate the creation of capacity building and policies within each country as requested. To have a regional conference on South-South cooperation within the framework of ECLAC, we believe must also contribute to position the demands and the challenges of the countries of the region at the heart of the international debate, such as consideration of multidimensional indicators for measuring development, review of the graduation process, and the challenges facing countries such as small island developing states and landlocked countries. I would like to conclude by recognizing the work carried out to date by this South-South Cooperation Committee, and we're hoping that the regional conference may be a very sound coordination of activities by the countries of the region to face COVID and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much. Well, and now we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and I will recognize the Minister of Foreign Affairs for this. Thank you, Vice Chancellor. And now, in accordance with the ECLAC rules of procedure, we will move to adopt the agreements of the Committee on South-South Cooperation. The draft agreement document was distributed to the states on the 10th of August 2021 to receive comments or proposals on the language until August the 15th at 10 p.m. Chile, that is 7 p.m. Costa Rican time. According to the comments received from Brazil and Peru, we corrected the agreements, a version that was distributed on Tuesday, August the 17th, among the delegations. We understand that there is consensus among all delegations on these versions, and in view of the ample consensus reached, we're happy and with a high sense of responsibility shared among all delegations and ECLAC, we will thereby adopt the agreements by this session of the South-South Cooperation Committee. And so I will proceed to give the agreements as adopted. And if you allow, I will use the hammer in show of the blows that we must make as a region to achieve all this in future. Thank you.
Debemos de estar todas y todos muy
Very well. We must all be very satisfied with this process and recognizing the extraordinary work done by the team led by our dear Alicia. These people at ECLAC that with their human and professional quality, they accompany creating proposals. And now we will proceed with the next item on the agenda, and we'll begin the dialogue among foreign ministers and high-level authorities on opportunities and challenges of international development cooperation in the context of the health, economic, and social recovery post-COVID-19. And so now I am pleased to recognize ECLAC Executive Secretary Alicia Bárcena to proceed with the dialogue among foreign ministers. Thank you, Chancellor, and with great pleasure, you have also passed on to me this very difficult task of moderating this session, and so I will do so with great pleasure and commitment, because also we would like to hear all high-level authorities that are with us here today. I believe this dialogue is an opportunity to reflect from the political viewpoint of cooperation authorities in the region as to where we stand and how we are addressing a certain paradox in terms of recovery, because in fact, many of our countries are already near to economic recovery. There is no doubt that we will grow a bit better now in 2021 with a 5.2 or a bit more, and the next with a 2.9. But we're talking of a paradox in terms of recovery, because this recovery will not be able to offset the poverty, extreme poverty, inequality, and employment informality. This is growth that is driven mainly by domestic demand, thanks, of course, to emergency transfers made by countries and that have helped households. And so what has really recovered in our region are two essential factors. One is consumption, private consumption, that is household consumption, and also exports. We are going to have a better pace in terms of exports, 22%, but these exports are owed to the better prices of raw materials and not so much an increased volume. And that is what we call the paradox of this 2021-2022 recovery. And we, dear Chancellor, we see that there are 5 challenges that I wanted to put to you today, the high authorities and ministers of foreign affairs. First, this sharpening of global asymmetries. How should our region face these asymmetries, and how, of course, through a greater coordination and synergy, of course, of South-South cooperation, of the mechanisms for regional and sub-regional integration, may we address these asymmetries that are sharpening. As you've said, access to vaccines is a major asymmetry within our region. There are those who already have 69%, but others that don't even have 1% of their population already vaccinated. And second, there is a major asymmetry in terms of wealth. The developed countries have increased their wealth and ours have reduced it. And I would say that the asymmetry in relation to climate change, that those who are suffering most are the small island states, Central America, and above all, that we do not have a clear mechanism for financing, for adaptation, to increase our resilience. Mitigation is clearer, and even the international financial agencies are moving towards measures such as the IMF that are conditioning loans, but many for mitigation and far less for adaptation. Second, I believe that one of the major challenges that developed countries have already announced major programs for recovery, economic recovery and environmental sustainability, the Green Compact in Europe, the US, with their major inputs and expansive fiscal policies and monetary. But our countries have not done this. We are still speaking of emergencies. We've not made explicit our plans for recovery, transformative recovery, speaking of building and rebuilding back better. And it's very important that we should do this. Why? Because investment, which is what we most need in Latin America, be it foreign or national or public, may have a clear direction to go in. And of course, transformative recovery that may lead to synergies between industrial, environmental, and energy and fiscal social policies in order to create employment and reduce the environmental footprint and, of course, more sustained growth. It is true that our countries have...
It's true that our countries have made enormous efforts and they are facing a very small fiscal space and high debt. There, external financing becomes essential, and middle-income countries like our region need to continue advocating for this. Access to external financing be equitable and regardless of the level of income, and that will truly grant accessible, affordable financing with accessibility for all countries needing it. And fourthly, this renewed cooperation. And I want to thank for the approval of this historical agreement. Today, a historical day where we set up this regional conference of South-South cooperation that will offer us the possibility of renewed cooperation and internal participation in the region of all the countries that is already becoming very evident. We have relevant examples of how you, high-level authorities of cooperation agencies, you've created specific funds for South-South cooperation, synergies that we need to establish with SEGHIP and other authorities. But in this conference, what's the virtue is that we are all here, 33 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. Foreign ministries have played an unprecedented role That's why it's so important to hear each and every one of you. In the vaccines, you've played a key role also in subjects of climate change in all kinds of areas, and therefore UN agencies that we are here, the global, the headquarters, coordinator, and we from ECLAC, it's vital for us to hear your thoughts. So I would like to move immediately to a very renowned group of panelists today and tell you that we are here to listen to you. We know that we can move forward in exchanging expertise, knowledge, best practices. Our region has a lot to offer, and therefore we have this large network of cooperation agencies on one side and you as authorities of the region. So it is a pleasure, if you allow me, Mr. Minister, I'll give the floor to Paul Shedd-Green, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Immigration of Antigua and Barbuda, a country that presides the alliance of the small island states, AOSI. And it is a pleasure because Antigua and Barbuda has played a key role in the dynamics of our region.
Shedd-Green, the floor is yours. Vamos a ver si está conectado. Tengo entendido que sí estaba conectado.
I understand that he was connected. Yes, he is connected. So,
Minister, are you there? Yes, he's there. Yes. Minister, we can see you. We can see you, but we cannot hear you. Maybe if you, now we can hear you. Yes, yes.
Creo que tiene problemas para escucharnos a nosotros, señora Alicia. Vamos a esperar un segundito que
he
conecte.
has problems to hear us. We'll wait for
We can hear you.
earphones.
You cannot hear us. Apparently, that's the problem. Rafael, can you contact him?
Sí, sí. Vamos a eso.
Now we can hear you. Yes.
On the right is the icon.
Creo que le están dando soporte desde su lado.
Okay.
Bueno.
Minister, we're ready to hear you. Creo que no nos oye, ¿eh?
Sí, ese es el problema. Le estaban explicando cómo habilitarlo, pero creo que no lo pudo hacer. Le estoy escribiendo por privado en el chat.
Writing to him. Well, so while this is solved, maybe we can move to.
Ya, entonces, mientras resolvemos el problema.
So while we solve the problem of our dear friend, Minister Paul Shedd-Green, we can move on to. Oh, so you're, yes. That's great. It's good to have you with us. So we are pleased to welcome you. Yes, Dominican Republic.
¿Tampoco está República Dominicana?
Sí, sí, aquí estamos.
Yes, Dominican Republic is here.
Please go ahead. Hugo Rivera es quien nos acompaña, ¿verdad? Viceministro de Relaciones Exteriores de la
Hugo
República.
Rivera is with us, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Dominican Republic. Please, you go ahead while we solve the audio issues with our friend, Minister Chad Green. Thank you. Your Excellency, Alicia Bárcena, dear friend, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission of ECLAC, Rodolfo Solano Quiroz, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Minister from Antigua and Barbuda, Ramon Cervantes, Minister of Foreign Affairs from Belize, Oliver Jobs, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Trade of CARICOM, from Grenada, Leslie Campbell, Minister, dear friend, from Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jamaica. Dear friends, ministers, members, on behalf of the Foreign Minister Roberto Álvarez, Minister of Foreign Affairs, I want to extend his apologies for being unable to participate in this event today. We would like to express the high honor of being able to participate in this extraordinary meeting, which is so important for the Dominican Republic. The pandemic in our region really impacted us, and we did not foresee it. In no scenario did we hear about the pandemic. No Ministry of Health nor no Department of Health had the preparation to really face the pandemic. In all countries, both in terms of budget and in our health system and economies, all of that impacted and affected the countries of the South. We have had to face cooperation, speaking about a small island state like Dominican Republic, and tourism sector has been highly hard hit in this. We have moved to support the health sector with technology, with support. And thanks to the solidarity of the countries from the South, the Dominican Republic has received cooperation from South-South in a regional, multilateral, and cooperation frameworks for recovery. So we believe that with the reactivation of economic activity, we will experience a growth of 10% starting 2021. In the case of Dominican Republic, exports have increased, remittances as well, but we've had tremendous impact on tourism that generated $7 to $10 billion. It used to do it in the region after the great work we've done with private sector, civil society, to partner multi-sectoral alliances that have helped the government of Dominican Republic to overcome the health and social protection issues presented by the pandemic. Also, we have implemented a large plan for vaccination, Vacúnate, TRT, where more than 10 million doses have been applied. 80 or 90% of our population is already immunized, 65% with the first doses and the rest with the second doses. And with the idea that the challenges faced by the world after the health crisis, the economic crisis, or the impact of coronavirus leads us to reflect and think again, how are we going to finance the region, and how in the case of Dominican Republic that is hit by cyclones or tropical storms, how are we going to be able to finance our economy and protect ourselves from collateral damage of natural phenomena? So that is why we underscore the strengthening of a regional architecture in order to accomplish the 2030 agenda and SDGs. It is necessary to say that through different mechanisms, South-South cooperation can respond to these challenges, and this is evidenced in successful results of technical cooperation. It is ever more important cooperation instruments among different countries, and that these instruments be effective, not only to transfer ideas, that we need to be creative in order to fund and finance everything that is happening to us. Therefore, we would like to thank the cooperation we receive. We congratulate the treatment that ECLAC has assigned to this subject, because cooperation today is vital. Cooperation continuing to support the island states. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot but mention the situation experienced painfully by Haiti. Haiti, a country with whom we share the island, needs help, needs aid, needs international cooperation, has been struck by an earthquake with disastrous consequences of lives and economic problems. And therefore, Haiti needs the friendly hand of countries of the region here, meeting here, and that through cooperation we can coordinate all the necessary efforts and provide hope to that nation that needs it. We reiterate the contents of the UN General Assembly agreements that of 2020 regarding South-South cooperation, reaffirming the commitment of the 2030 agenda of leaving no one behind, as well as adopting tangible measures to support those in vulnerability conditions in different countries, and thus and finally, international cooperation, especially that for development, is the beacon of opportunities for the different peoples. Therefore, and in order to strengthen our institutions and therefore have a prosperous, dynamic region, and that we need to face this together. Let us bet on strengthening cooperation, on strengthening the integration of the region. With a more united region, we believe we'll have the highest and best well-being for all the region. Thank you very much, Mr. Hugo. It is an honor to hear you. Greetings to the Foreign Minister, Roberto Alvarez. You have underlined two issues. First, the collapse of tourism and the difficulty to recover this economic activity, which is so relevant. And secondly, how to improve our regional integration capacities so that together we can move forward and overcome these very sensitive problems of transformative recovery. And now,
Minister from Antigua and Barbuda, our friend Paul Chet Green. I think we are ready with you now. Over, Minister.
Thank you, Excellency. And let me apologize for the technology flaw, which for a moment challenged my participation in today's session. Let me extend also very pleasant greetings to my colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen here assembled. We continue to meet in a virtual space owing to the realities of today's COVID pandemic. Excellencies, allow me to speak to the topic before us, that of opportunities and challenges in the context of health, economic, and social recovery post-COVID-19, and to do so from the point of view of international development cooperation. It's an absolute truism that small island developing states, like the rest of the international community, continues to be plagued by the catastrophic impact of COVID-19. This reality has rapidly morphed into a three-pronged axis of devastation to include global economic and social crises, arguably the most destructive in world history. Moreover, the pandemic and its fallouts have exposed the significant structural gaps and have severely eroded development gains of nations, including the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Development. Consequently, the need for international development cooperation is greater today than ever before, particularly towards the influencing of the global recovery post-COVID-19. Antigua and Barbuda is a case in point. A small island developing country has seen the turmoil of the COVID-19 pandemic, and to all and sundry, this is undeniable. Undeniable because to date, our debt to GDP ratio has increased exponentially. GDP per capita has contracted by more than 22%, and we have seen government's revenues plummet by at least 40%. The need for urgent relief has never been more paramount if we're to survive. All of this within the context of pre-existing challenges, including a hostile multilateral trading system, blacklisting, threats of corresponding banking relations, and a very real possibility of the Caribbean being locked out of the global financial architecture. The pandemic has exposed the precarity of the hard-won development gains, has underscored the financing challenges, particularly as it relates to SIDS and middle-income countries, including our very limited fiscal space, reduction in trade and tourism, and extensive economic contraction, not to mention the ever-increasing high level of indebtedness. It would be remiss of me, Madam Chair, not to address Antigua and Barbuda's high indebtedness. And the fact is that successive administrations of my country have had to grapple with the damaging impacts of the intrinsic vulnerabilities that plague small and micro states such as ours, and which continue, unfortunately, to haunt us. Whether it be borrowing from international market to fund repeated rebuilding efforts after frequent and very destructive tropical storms, or the costs associated with implementing efforts for climate adaptation, risk management and mitigation, or the responding to external shocks, including, of course, the most recent financial crisis, which we, I should point out, did not instigate, but from which we continue to keep our people afloat through the maintenance of social safety nets. These represent the realities of our existence in today's COVID environment, and the need for international development cooperation as we plow through this difficult period and look for an escape, a final landing in a post-COVID environment. Borrowing from the international market has been our only option and has proven to be untenable and detrimental to our own poverty alleviation objectives. Madam Chair, colleagues, what is plaguing us most is our high income classification, which inhibits our ability to access concessionary and grant funding to finance these efforts, irrespective of the fact that this classification is rather fragile. And as we have seen with repeated storms and now COVID-19 has been wiped away in a matter of hours. Due to the ravaging effects of COVID-19, coupled with other climate challenges, we need to rebuild so often. And the question begs itself, how will we finance this mammoth undertaking of rebuilding? Considering what has been detailed so far, Madam Chair, there are two issues that are pellucid. And they're one, that no country can do this alone. And two, that international cooperation is critical in addressing these challenges. It requires international development cooperation to address these unique opportunities needed to facilitate global recovery. This international development cooperation I speak of needs to evolve beyond the current traditional forms, which are dominated, as we know, by wealth and specialized knowledge, as they're deemed, and requires a recalibrating of the existing partnerships or relationships between donor countries and recipient countries. This evolution I speak of a new type of international development cooperation, is an obligation to the international community if we're to achieve a robust post-COVID international recovery. Let me proffer for the benefit of my colleagues what I consider to be, or what we in Antigua and Barbuda consider to be, some of the tenets of this new evolution, this new evolved type international relation. They are one, supporting and complementing efforts of developing countries to guarantee the provision of universal social basic standards to their citizens. This is a means for people to exercise their basic human rights. Secondly, promoting and convergence of the developing, particularly in poorest countries, to higher levels of income and well-being, correcting extreme international inequalities. Thirdly, supporting efforts of developing countries to participate actively and meaningfully in the provision of international public goods. Complementary to this evolution is the reaffirmed commitment by the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which remains the only global blueprint for recovery post-COVID, not for Antigua and Barbuda only, but for every country. SDG 17, for example, which concerns the revitalized global partnership for sustainable development, will prove to be a most transformative and fundamental goal for the attainment of the 2030 agenda. Through international development cooperation, combined with pursuit of the SDGs, recovery from the pandemic can be achieved if premised on the following pillars. One, urgent access to vaccines for all. I repeat, urgent access to vaccines for all. Two, creating fiscal space for COVID-19 response and recovery. Three, identifying and addressing all inequalities. Fourth, ensuring the transfer of technology and closing the gap of the digital divide. Fifth place, I advocate advancing the climate change agenda, followed by leveraging input from people, and finally, global involvement of our youth, global involvement of our young people. Madam Chair, addressing the needs of the most vulnerable countries through development cooperation will prove to be an essential part of future cooperation structures, and the opportunity exists for acceleration of our South-South cooperation and the strengthening of multilateralism. Sustainable economic growth, which incorporates the three pillars of sustainable development and climate change, will and needs to be a most fundamental aspect of any global recovery strategy over the medium to long term. Smart recovery, as it is often dubbed, needs to directly influence international development cooperation, which presents the nations of the world with the opportunity to rebuild better, to build stronger. Avoid replicating the unsustainable practices of the past while utilizing quick fix approaches. Madam Chair, I find today's and yesterday's or this particular session to be most important as we recalibrate, as we reset the global clock, as we focus on post-COVID and the importance of international development cooperation. As I said, there are some basic tools which we should seek to implement. Before implementing, first seek to embrace as common tools of engagement, then which we need to embrace as we set about to recalibrate, restructure, reorganize, even our international relations and international development cooperation structures. Antigua and Barbuda always commends your office on the initiatives rolled out for the involvement, inclusion, and participation of our members. This one being no less so. Be pleased with you, Madam Chair. I remain available throughout the rest of this course. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Green. I think you have raised such an important set of issues that we should keep in mind. And I think with this conference on South-South cooperation, we have a platform where all the voices should be heard. And we have, as you know, in ECLAC, we have placed the Caribbean first because we believe that the Caribbean countries in particular are facing threats and risks that are even more profound than even before the COVID-19. And I think this community needs to be in close contact with the Caribbean economies to make sure that you are not so hardly hit by the blacklisting, by the lack of corresponding banking, by additional, I would say, measures that are really very bad for all, but in particular for the Caribbean. And indeed, I think the urgent access to vaccines, the fiscal space, the transfer of technology, the climate change agenda, and the global involvement. And I think I like very much the way you put it, the recalibration of the global clock to reorganize how we participate as a region in the world. So I think that a very relevant feature of this South-South Cooperation Conference is precisely the participation of the Caribbean countries. And with that, I would like to give the floor to our friend Ramón Cervantes, Ministro de Estado del Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores, Comercio Exterior e Inmigración de Belice. Dear Ramón, the floor is yours, whether you wish to speak in Spanish, in English, or in Maya. Ramón, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just a minute. We have some. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you hearing me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. A pleasant good morning to all. I acknowledge the organizers of this timely extraordinary meeting of the Committee of South-South Cooperation of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC. Her Excellency Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of ECLAC, His Excellency Rodolfo Solano Quiroz, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, the staff of the ECLAC Secretariat, distinguished participants, excellencies. In their book, Why Nations Fail, the authors Darren Asimoglu and James Robinson elucidate the importance of the concept of critical junctures. The advent of COVID-19 pandemic is such a critical juncture, and it forcefully reminds us that we must reevaluate and redesign, and as the previous speaker said, recalibrate previously held orthodoxies, like in the field of international cooperation, in order to adapt and remain fit for purpose and remain relevant in light of the rapidly changing circumstances. For some time, we have known that the use of an income-based graduation criteria for the dispensation of international cooperation does not adequately take into account the varied developmental challenges faced by many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. The combinations of challenges such as COVID-19, climate change, growing income inequality, economic downturns, mounting national debt, and social turmoil that we face as a region has made it imperative for our survival to actively pursue a paradigm shift in international cooperation. What we need vitally is international cooperation that is multidimensional, multi-level, innovative, dynamic, inclusive, sustainable, and at the same time embraced by all relevant stakeholders. Ambitious and desirous, but this is what is required if we are to recover from the pandemic, if we are to preserve the hard-fought progress that we made in the recent past in terms of poverty reduction, and if we are to advance on the path of prosperity for our peoples. In Belize, one of our main challenges in international development cooperation has been maintaining the sustainability of the development gains that we had made previously, despite having a substantial cooperation agenda. As a region, economic growth has been anemic, being the lowest in 7 decades from 2010 to 2019. This is true in Belize, where GDP growth has remained below 3% since 2015, with a low negative growth of negative 14.4% in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. This demonstrates that although Belize is considered as an upper middle income country, having the second highest per capita income in Central America, we remain vulnerable to external shocks that can set back our fragile gains. Also concerning is the fact that while poverty rate in Latin America fell from 45.4% in 2002 to 27.8% in 2014, approximately 43% of our population is still considered to be below the poverty line. This is clear evidence that single measure indicators like GDP per capita should not be the sole determinant of whether a country graduates, thereby excluding it from official development assistance. It also means that we have to refocus our attention on being more people-centered in the analysis and evaluation of our numbers and statistics. An unsustainable debt burden is another challenge that threatens to reverse decades of development gains made through international cooperation and local efforts. In the case of Belize, our total external debt is approximately $4.2 billion Belize dollars, slightly above 130% of GDP, a quarter of which is held by private bondholders. In spite of this, in the recent past, the government of Belize has paid about $180 million in external debt servicing in 2019, $162.36 million in 2020, and $22 million in January of 2021 alone. All this was done while grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic, the resulting shutdown of the economy, and the provisions of unemployment assistance and stimulus packages for the tourism and agriculture sector and the general population. It is therefore an opportune time to expand South-South cooperation to include advocacy for reforming the international debt architecture, specifically through a multilateral debt restructuring mechanism and a multilateral credit rating agency. Furthermore, the G20 debt service suspension initiative should be expanded to include all stakeholders, including the private sector, multilateral institutions, and vulnerable middle-income countries, and also continue beyond 2021. Earlier this month, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published a summary of its sixth assessment report, where it revealed the sobering projection that we are set to pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal by mid-century and the 2 degrees Celsius mark by 2080 if there are no drastic emissions reductions. In Central America and the Caribbean, this means that we need to prepare for an increasing frequency and intensity of storms, hurricanes, drought, and rising sea levels. The prospect of climate refugees in the region in our lifetime cannot be ruled out. Also, the irony that those that least contribute to global greenhouse gas emissions are disproportionately affected by the negative effects of climate change should not be lost. Bearing this in mind, it is prudent to link Paris Agreement targets such as zero emissions and resilience building to international cooperation wherever possible. This is in line with the concept of transformative recovery, which is essential going forward. Prior to COVID-19, we were already walking on a tightrope in dealing with development challenges and natural disasters. With the addition of COVID-19, we are now in the middle of a perfect storm. As of June 2021, COVID-19 had claimed more than 1.26 million lives across the region. In Belize, as of yesterday, there have been 350 deaths with 870 active cases. This sounds like a small number of cases, but our healthcare system has been taken to task to respond to this current third wave. The silver lining, however, has been the international cooperation that has been forthcoming in terms of vaccine acquisitions and donations. In this regard, I wish to thank the COVAX facility, India, Barbados, the United Arab Emirates, Mexico, United Kingdom, and the United States of America for their contributions and donations. Ultimately, the measure of whether this extraordinary meeting of the Committee of South-South Cooperation is a success will be if we are able to formulate extraordinary solutions to the extraordinary problems that confront us today. This will entail linking the insights of the development in transition, middle income trap, and structural gaps approaches as a useful tool to reorganize international cooperation to make it pragmatic and effective, as well as the insights shared by the various participants over these past 2 days. It will no doubt require a reinvigorated sense of multilateralism, which will make innovative use of all the traditional forms of international cooperation and possibly new forms. And finally, we must also find a way to ensure that international cooperation helps us all to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Cervantes, for your very, I would say, acute words on the way we have to advocate really for a reform on the debt multilateral systems and including a credit rating agency, expanding the DSSI, and to really assist all the countries, regardless of their level of GDP per capita, to participate in the context of, in particular, as you very well said, the Caribbean, and you are located as a bridge also between the Caribbean and Central America in a way, in which you highlighted the very high indebtedness that Belize is confronting, over 100% of GDP, over 30% of GDP, and paying a debt service that is actually complicating the fiscal space that you have as a country. And this is happening almost in all countries of the Caribbean and many of Central America as well. So thank you so much, Minister Cervantes. We count on Belize for your very important contribution to this conference and to this, of course, to this dialogue. Déjenme pasar ahora la palabra a nuestro muy querido
And now I would like to hand over to our dear friend, Carlos Ramiro Martinez, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. It is a pleasure to greet you, my dear Carlos Ramiro. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Alicia, and a major embrace to you and all friends who are following this meeting. Minister Rodolfo Solano, Chancellor of Costa Rica, my dear Alicia, and Minister, Vice Ministers, delegates of countries and international agencies. It is a pleasure for me to address you with these words, and above all, recognize the initiative of the government of Costa Rica as chair of the presiding officers of this ECLAC instance in convening this extraordinary meeting in order to examine the means to improve the operation of the committee, including the need to make institutional changes with a view to make recommendations to ECLAC. We also thank the Executive Secretariat and Alicia Bárcena, who represents it with such dignity, and her team for her continuous support and the presentations made in these days that undoubtedly enrich our dialogue regarding the actions to be taken in order to renew and intensify South-South cooperation initiatives in our region and from our region towards the world. This year, Guatemala took over the chair of the group of friends of middle-income countries of the UN, and it is a space that has allowed us to contribute to world discussion to reconsider the multilateral structure for support of developing countries, and that should be based on multidimensional criteria. From our viewpoint, the economic growth in itself does not necessarily reflect the realities in our countries. At all levels of income per capita, developing countries continue to face serious challenges related to the eradication of poverty, inequality, foreign debt, vulnerability in climate matters, creation of employment, diversification, and the transformation of economies and access to international markets. Likewise, our countries face structural barriers and systemic barriers that perpetuate cycles of violence, inequality, and poverty and exclusion. And assessing South-South cooperation, it is important to reaffirm that this is a significant element to supplement international cooperation, not as a substitute to North-South cooperation or cooperation for development. We recognize the relevance of this, but also the historical differences and the specificities of South-South cooperation. We highlight that this must be considered as an expression of solidarity and cooperation among people and countries based on the experience in line with the national plans of each nation. And in this context, we believe that middle-income countries have an important role to play, since they may play a double role as the givers as well as the receivers of cooperation. This is reflected in financial, technological transfer and capacity building provided through projects and initiatives for South-South and triangular cooperation. We appreciate regional efforts made seeking to deepen concrete actions that we countries may take, as well as international agencies to optimize the benefit of South-South cooperation for developing countries without leaving aside the middle-income countries. The proposal to turn the Committee for South-South Cooperation into a conference is something that may contribute to raising discussions and making positive changes for our countries. Exchange of knowledge, creation of partnerships, among other ideas. We thank, along these lines, the presentation made of the strategy for the entire system of South-South cooperation and the challenges to the implementation drafted by the UN Office for South-South cooperation, and that includes consideration of these aspects, and that will serve as a guideline for more coordinated and coherent action of the system through the 5 areas mentioned in the document. Ladies and gentlemen, the crisis of the pandemic caused by COVID-19 has extended even further by the slow and unequal distribution of vaccines, especially in middle and low-income countries. We reiterate the relevance of ensuring equitable and universal access to vaccines, medications, and safe, effective, and accessible treatments against COVID-19, recalling the political declaration on world equitable access to COVID vaccines and at the same time recognize that these should be seen as global public goods. We also recall the calls made this year by the President of the General Assembly and the Secretary General of the United Nations and the Chair of ECOSOC, so that the UN development system may improve their cooperation with middle-income countries in their full diversity. We want to achieve our aims, and if we take seriously this statement of leaving no one behind, we must rethink the multilateral structure to support all developing countries based on criteria of vulnerability and risk factors that go beyond the income per capita. Therefore, we believe that we consider and reaffirm that South-South cooperation has the potential to greatly contribute to those changes. We are convinced that greater participation by middle-income countries and international cooperation initiatives may have a multiplying effect that will contribute to the achievement of our aims at a regional and global level. We have an opportunity to become a successful example of promoting South-South triangular cooperation before the world. Our region has the technical and technological capacities to achieve this, and is the basis on which we must build future initiatives. Once again, our thanks to Minister Solano, you, dear Alicia, and a warm embrace to everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos Ramirez. I think that you have posed interesting points, especially how the UN system must support countries. And this now conference, together with the Office for South-South Cooperation of the UN and resident coordinators, must coordinate better in order to truly respond to your demands, the country demands. That is essential. And so, of course, have this very much in mind in everything that we do. So thank you very much, Carlos Ramiro. It is a true pleasure.
Leslie is Minister of State of the Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica. Dear Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Y ahí vienen los videos, ¿no?
Ms. Alicia Barcena, Executive Secretary of ECLAC. Mr. Rodolfo Solano Quiros, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. A pleasant good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted international development cooperation and has put pressure on the capacity of major donor countries and development institutions to render effective and timely assistance to Latin America and the Caribbean countries. Perhaps more than ever, it has emphasized the vulnerabilities and inequalities among and within our nations. The disparities in the pace of recovery from the pandemic, as well as the fair and equitable access to safe and affordable vaccines, are examples of some of these structural gaps within our region. In this context, increased solidarity and greater self-reliance through strengthened South-South cooperation with Latin America and the Caribbean must underpin our collaborative efforts to get back on track to achieving the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. Colleague ministers, permit me to share a few concrete actions that must be prioritized by the Committee on South-South Cooperation and the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean in meeting the challenges and opportunities for international development cooperation post-COVID-19. First, on the policy front, as a region of predominantly middle-income developing countries, we must continue to advocate for multi-dimensional measurements of development to be mainstreamed into long-term development financing for Latin America and the Caribbean countries. For the last few decades, the international development community has given priority to least developed countries, while increasingly marginalizing highly indebted middle-income countries from access to adequate, affordable, and concessional development financing. This problem has been particularly acute for small island development states, like Jamaica, that are being graduated from development assistance on the basis of GDP per capita income, despite the rising cost of climate change adaptation and resilience building against natural disasters. Indeed, according to the UNDP 2020 Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, 67% of the world's 1.3 billion multidimensionally poor live in middle-income countries. We must, therefore, address the middle-income trap by radically shifting the policy focus of international development cooperation from poor countries to poor people post-COVID-19. Unless a multidimensional view of development measurement is embraced by our international development partners, we will, as a region, struggle to stimulate inclusive economic growth and job creation, access finance for resilience building and recovery, ensure debt sustainability, and achieve the necessary fiscal space to provide a social safety net for the most vulnerable groups within our respective societies. All of these elements, we know, are high among our priorities and drive our processes. Our advocacy for change in the approach must be heightened. Secondly, the COVID-19 pandemic has provided opportunities for expanded South-South cooperation by exposing the vulnerabilities in key social sectors. Opportunities have arisen for sharing knowledge, expertise, and development solutions among Latin American and Caribbean countries with similar development pathways and challenges in key areas such as strengthening the capacity of the public health systems, diversifying and expanding interregional and intra-regional trade, improving ICT infrastructure, especially to support the education sector and public service delivery, promoting e-commerce, including the digitization of agricultural value chains for rural communities, and for rural transformation and the integration of small farmers, and building resilience into our tourism sectors. We believe that these areas of focus should therefore continue to be among our priorities for a post-COVID recovery process. Thirdly, the institutional framework and mechanisms for South-South cooperation among Latin American and Caribbean countries must be fit for purpose in fostering strengthened strategic partnerships for green, equitable, and resilient development beyond COVID-19. However, any decision on the most appropriate institutional design or reconfiguration must be the product of inclusive discussions and consultations among our stakeholders with a view to ensure the broadest ownership. Having agile, participatory, and results-oriented institutional arrangements will, in turn, enable ECLAC member states to further integrate South-South and triangular cooperation into national development planning. We believe this would also help to achieve greater synergies between the work of ECLAC and the regional development banks that are leading post-COVID-19 recovery efforts. Colleague ministers, as we leverage the transformative role of the South-South cooperation in responding to the opportunities and challenges for international development cooperation presented by COVID-19 crisis, I wish to underscore the importance of leaving no one behind. Let us therefore reorient South-South cooperation to a more people-centric and inclusive approach as we strive to build back better and accelerate the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We definitely hear you. We hear very much the urgency to have access to finance, to cooperation, to build resilience in key sectors, tourism being one, but agriculture being another one. And I like very much what you said. We have to move from poor countries to poor people. I think you're right. And this COVID has exposed these terrible vulnerabilities. And I think this conference is about strengthening the institutions that are participating in cooperation. So rightly so, what you said is totally in line with what is trying to achieve. Déjenme contarles cómo vamos a seguir. Vamos a ver dos videos de nuestro querido canciller.
We will now hear two videos from Foreign Minister Felipe Solá and Erika Moñez, and then I will give back the floor to our dear Foreign Minister Rodolfo Solano. So let us see the first the videos of Felipe Solá, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Worship of Argentina. Please go ahead with the video.
Quiero saludar a la secretaria ejecutiva de la CEPAL.
I would like to greet the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, dear Alicia Bárcena, Foreign Minister of Costa Rica, Rodolfo Solano Quiroz, particularly as Chair of the presiding officers for the South-South cooperation, for having co-organized this meeting, which is so important. And also, I'd like to greet all the vice presidents and all attendees. As we know, the strategy of cooperation for development cannot be alien to the circumstances imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, especially if the health crisis coincides with insufficiency of resources allocated to financing and international cooperation, both demanded by the global response to pandemic. We need to have more audacious responses and more comprehensive in financing. As part of the effort, our country has advanced in international cooperation actions with different agencies of the UN, like Food, FAO, a World Food Program, PMA, and UNICEF. Also, in association with regional entities, PAHO, Pan American Health Organization and ICA, Inter-American Institute for Agricultural Cooperation. In science and technology, we are currently collaborating with ECLAC and with the Ibero-American Program of Science and Technology, elaborating strategies and setting up scientific networks. Bilaterally, we are promoting the financing of research programs related to COVID-19. At the same time, we maintain exchanges with CONACYT of Mexico and with Chile, exchange of treatments used by both countries. And with the Republic of Cuba, we've had also exchanges of researchers. We have had also bilateral dialogue with Costa Rica on struggle against pandemic. Based on all the initiatives, we reaffirm our conviction that the Latin American and Caribbean countries should work jointly, regionally, and globally. Furthermore, if the present scenario raises new challenges and opportunities as to access to financing and cooperation designed for recovery post-COVID-19 to be equitable and sustainable. The crisis has hard hit the whole region. 90% of countries are middle-income countries, and many of them have serious difficulties when receiving cooperation or to receive cooperation, especially accessing international funds. And it is for this reason that we celebrate the role of ECLAC supporting our countries, not only discussing the asymmetries in the world as to access to vaccine, but also combating climate change and access to financing for development. These are also asymmetric points, but also ECLAC proposes several initiatives. The health self-sufficiency plan that Alicia Bárcena presented at the last summit of ECLAC foreign ministers, it was surprisingly clear and remarkable. We support that plan. It has the ability to contribute to regional integration based on program scientific development objectives and also social justice. For those same reasons, we support the initiative of transforming the South-South Cooperation Committee into a regional conference for the development and cooperation of Latin America and the Caribbean. This will strengthen the institutions and capacity of action of this body in a context that calls us to be together in order to increase productive capacity, technology, and institutionals. Argentina, as part of the high-level committee of the South-South UN Committee, is available to work very closely with ECLAC to debate, discuss, coordinate efforts, and leverage the Latin American and Caribbean cooperation agenda. Thank you. Thank you, dear Foreign Minister Felipe Solá. Please tell him, Mariana, I see you smiling. Please convey our thanks to the Foreign Minister Felipe Solá for this encouraging message from Felipe Solá. Thanks, Argentina. And now we'll hear Minister of Foreign Affairs of Panama, who will also send a video, pre-recorded video. Erika Moines, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Panama. Please go ahead. Your Excellency, Rodolfo Solano Quiroz, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, and Chair of the South-South Cooperation Committee of ECLAC. Honorable Alicia Bárcena, Executive Secretary of ECLAC. Your Excellencies, Ministers of Foreign Affairs, participating in this dialogue. The challenges we face in countries as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic are manifold, and expectations several and multidimensional. We continue having inequalities to overcome, and in this context, we trust that integration and multilateralism will continue to be strengthened as sound instruments for a better coordination of action, so as to have the aid of international cooperation to share experiences and find health, social, and economic and environmental solutions, addressing a post-pandemic recovery, seeing to the needs of all of our peoples. Panama responds to the dynamics of international relations in a global environment where multilateral agencies play a protagonic, a key role, and transformations in the economic sector demand for a new view of international, a new concept of international cooperation. From as to sustainable development goals, Panama has shown leadership with actions that lead us to implement the 2030 agenda, seeking partnerships with all sectors of society. Panama and the UN system signed in the framework of Cooperation for Sustainable Development 2021-2025 in order to contribute to reduce social, economic, and territorial inequalities in the country so as to leave no one behind. Working in 4 areas. 1, equality and social inclusion, economic and environmental. 2, governance, citizenship, and justice. 3, climate change, environmental management, risk management. And 4, prevention of violence and protection of human rights. We firmly believe that South-South and triangular cooperation are outstanding as effective tools for implementing the 2030 agenda, supporting formulation of public policies, providing opportunities to citizens, and reinvigorating sectors that have been hard hit in the pandemic. The pandemic has left impacts, increasing economic and financial needs, and the the levels of debt in our country, and it is in a disproportionate manner in the service sector, increasing social inequalities and gaps. In spite of all the progress, we recognize in this matter, women in Latin America and the Caribbean continue suffering discrimination in labor, in access to jobs, and in decision-making in public and private sectors, as well as in the rural area. Likewise, we need to promote generation of public policies that will see to the needs of girls, adolescents, and women in order to break and stop the cycle of violence and discrimination. The government and Republic of Panama has developed a strategy that's called Blancolmena, so as to promote a territorial environment designed to overcome hunger through a harmonious and integrated offer of public services so as to take them to those who need them most, and also promote territorial development with the help of local governments, technical missions at the level of country and citizens. I would like to underscore the green recovery and action and climate action for a post-COVID-19 recovery. Panama, a historically trade-dependent nation, as one of the river pathways that's largest in the world, understands that we need to stop the impact of climate change, and we have positioned ourselves as a carbon negative country. Panama evolves to the decarbonization of economy and increasing resilience. That is a broad concept of action, of climate action, of management for the development of the country in compliance with the Paris Accord. Also, we have called on the will of nations so as to achieve an alliance of the Americas in pro of climate transparencies, promoting agreements and mechanisms to share climate data, providing scientific evidence for decision-making vis-a-vis the climate crisis. The national government supports actions of priority actions so that ever more students can use educational technology solutions so as to support their learning process in school years. As to poverty and inequality, access to medicine is improved through the expansion of generic drugs, the strengthening of the social protection system, and improvement in inclusion programs of indigenous peoples. Also, we support the development of the strategy to distribute and prioritize COVID-19 vaccine in order to save the people and reach herd immunity. To conclude, we need to underscore that international cooperation continues to be a foreign affairs policy that after the COVID-19 evidences the pressing need of greater solidarity, addressing multinational problems, strengthening institutions, human capital, promoting the exchange of experiences focused on different themes that will help us reach concrete results and of greater benefit for all of our peoples. Thank you. Thank you to the Foreign Minister, Erika Moines, for your very relevant and timely message. Our thanks for this great message. Mr. Foreign Minister, I've complied with your mandate. I want to summarize with a few points that were raised in this session. Firstly, nobody can be saved on its own. In fact, we need the help of everyone. And that is why it's so important to include all countries beyond their income levels in all formats, and indeed cooperation, international cooperation, South-South cooperation, to be based on the development of countries' sovereignties, recognizing national strategies, but also to be flexible in order to respond to the uncertainty of the global context that prevails. And of course, guaranteeing access to financing, that is one of the main issues, main topics for all countries, regardless of income, but particularly for the smaller economies. And it should be a concessional access as well as to all the other instruments that are being discussed in international fora. We've also seen the importance of developing a battery of indicators that indeed ECLAC is now available. Foreign minister and foreign ministers, in order to move forward in this proposal of generating multidimensional indicators that will best reflect the problems of middle-income countries. Count on us. Also, our Conference of Statistics of the Americas is willing and available in order to move in this direction. Climate change, the asymmetries we are facing regarding that, the high indebtedness, financing, and vaccines, all of this calls for building resilience, more and better multilateralism, and build this resilience in sectors like tourism, agriculture, trade, services, retail. And we believe that this conference of South-South cooperation is a space that will provide all those opportunities, and also to go beyond the orthodoxy of cooperation and build a new paradigm that is what we all search for in order to have a more sustainable egalitarian recovery. Dear friend, Foreign Minister of Costa Rica, as chair of ECLAC and chair of this committee, we want to express to you our deepest thanks to your team, Rita Bolaños, Rita Hernández, Adriana Bolaños, Rodrigo Carazo. You have really exercised key leadership and deep leadership, and we feel so pleased to continue working under your guidance. And I wanted to express our most sincere thanks from ECLAC to all of you, foreign ministers and officials, countries of the region, representatives of cooperation agencies, representatives of agencies, funds, and programs. I see some colleagues here connected, dear Alejandra, from UNAIDS, but many more. And of course, to greet all Western coordinators. I share with you our joy for the very successful result of this extraordinary meeting of the Development Cooperation South-South Committee. And thanks for providing us the support to move to this regional conference of South-South cooperation and to link to the existing strategies of CEGIP and South-South Committee. But here we have the Caribbean countries that are so important to us. BAPA plus 40 leaves very important mandate, and it is renewed today in the light of the pandemic COVID-19. We've had high-level discussions these days, 35 countries, 4 associate members, more than 150 government and cooperation agency members of agencies, funds, and programs. We had the participation for the first time of the director of the Cooperation Center of OECD, the permanent secretary of CELA, and also we had the participation of AECID and GIZ of our region. So, Mr. Chair Rodolfo Solano, our thanks, our congratulations, and you can be certain that from ECLAC we will continue to work with deep commitment to contribute to economic development. And of course, jointly with you and your team, we hope to continue and move ahead. Now we are ready to undertake the financing for development, a view from the region, and we will soon provide that report. And we are, of course, always available for your comments on the document that we have submitted here for debate. Thank you very much. It is time to strengthen our national, regional, economic, and political agreements. And in this path, you can count on ECLAC. And before recognizing you, Mr. Foreign Minister, to close this meeting, I wanted to express my special thanks to the ECLAC team, to Raúl García Buchaca, our Executive Secretary, Luis Yáñez, who was unable to be with us, Jimena Arias, Enrique Oviedo, who has conducted great work, Karen Hase, Luz Flores, David El Moral, and all the group of sticks, to María Eugenia Johnson and the conference team, and to the Public Information Unit. Thank you very much, Mr. Foreign Minister. The floor is yours with my deepest thanks from the ECLAC House. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Alicia. We are all of us, the inhabitants of this fabulous region of Latin America and the Caribbean, are very pleased to be here with you. Now, the data you provided us just now, sitting at 35 countries, 4 associate countries, and more than 20 organizations participating has been phenomenal. And this is a clear sign that we need to continue working and continue heading in the same direction. Dear friends and colleagues, we have reached the end of our extraordinary meeting of the Committee of South-South Cooperation for Latin America and the Caribbean. For Costa Rica, our experience as chair has been truly an honor and a pleasure, and we are pleased to have been worked with you over the years. Now, we would like to express our absolute appreciation to the highest authorities, ministers, delegates for their valuable contributions over the last 2 days. I would like to point out the importance of this dialogue and consensus, what these imply, and that they are actually a response, a reply to ECLAC's mandate issued back in October. Likewise, I would also like to express my specific recognition of ECLAC's long-lasting contribution and presence for this extraordinary meeting of the Committee of South-South Cooperation. I would like to underscore Alicia's leadership. As mentioned by many before me, our region is facing a challenge to come up with strategies that will result in a more robust commitment from international cooperation based, of course, on the new context we face regarding the pandemic. This is something we will hopefully triumphantly face, and so that we will have sustainable, inclusive development that is based on true innovative unity. Now, the challenges make it necessary for us to work closely so that we can come up with new, more robust partnerships that will allow us to overcome the challenges we face today, which are specifically grave in the Caribbean island nations as a result of the pandemic and other issues. Now, we believe and affirm that it is necessary to have a new measurement system for the countries that goes beyond economic aspects and that takes into consideration the various idiosyncrasies of our countries, so that international cooperation will actually contribute fairly and equitably to our efforts toward development, and that will take into consideration the structural gaps and other very unique characteristics of our individual realities. We truly appreciate ECLAC's work on the document called Development in Transition. This provides us with a foundation for a renewed effort in Latin America and the Caribbean. The document contains valuable input that will allow us to continue to reach consensus and have a single voice as a region in multilateral fora. This addresses ways to alleviate debt and to reinforce regional cooperation by way of boosting credit capacity and the response of regional, financial, sub-regional, and national financial institutions, as well as the ties between them. We need to continue pull together efforts that will lead to a transformative, profound changes in our societies and economies, and to leverage the opportunities we have as a region. And the future South-South Regional Conference for Latin America and the Caribbean will be an opportunity for us to continue to work together to find the best possible response for the issues our member countries face. Dear friends and colleagues, this change from committee to conference will provide us with a fresh breath of air, an opportunity to once again meet up and to reinvent ourselves as a region. Once this will be consolidated in November, we will be able to work more frequently on redesigning the cooperation systems so that they will consider income distribution, equity, and well-being, as well as a plethora of other aspects, so that we can design a multi-dimensional approach to sustainable development. I would like to invite all of you to please join this incredible opportunity and move forward together. This will benefit development and the economy of the region. That is why we must continue to work toward solutions under strategic perspective that will further foster solidarity and our abilities to recover and to have economic recovery, rather, of all of our countries and all of our people. Costa Rica is fully aware of the need and of the importance and transcendence of having inclusive, sustainable development that meets the needs of the most vulnerable. We know that this involves recovery and rechanneling cooperation, all for the benefit of our people's well-being. As a result, a novel cooperation concept and structure should involve strategies that foster inclusive, green, comprehensive, resilient actions aimed at enabling us to respond to the new emerging needs faced by all. Dear friends and colleagues, leaders, those of us who are able to conjure up support in our different working realms, we must continue to prioritize constructive dialogue and cooperation to foster strengthening development further in our countries, inclusive, sustainable development for the marginalized, and ensure that our various stakeholders continue to be committed to our commitments, the 2030 agenda and the SDGs as well. These should continue to guide our collective efforts. Finally, this two-day event has taught us a great deal. And this concept of willingness and to actually overcome the challenges we face has been made very clear. I would like to express my utmost gratitude to all of the countries who have taken part. Your contributions have made this a much more rich event, and you have made it possible for this event to be, for the committee to become a conference. And we are convinced that this will provide us with the tool we need in the region to further consolidate South-South and triangular cooperation. Therefore, from San Jose, Costa Rica, from Casa María, home of all of us, for all of us, I would like to reiterate on behalf of the government of Costa Rica and as chair of this event that we are truly grateful to all of you, to ECLAC, to the entire team for the efforts carried out. And despite the fact that we are meeting virtually, after 2 days of this event, I feel as though we are even better friends than before, and we are fully convinced that we will continue to do our best for our region. So allow me to adjourn this working session with, once again, my most sincere gratitude and appreciation to all of you. Good afternoon.